ladies and gentlemen, to an all-new reaction and review. Tonight, ladies and gentlemen, I am covering a rather interesting horror film that was just recently released on DVD. In fact, the only time that I ever even heard about this thing is when somebody handed me a flyer from Family Video, and they had as one of their new releases this film. And that was a couple of months back. But the film was actually made last year, so I'm going to count it as a 2010 film. And before I go into this at all, I want to say that tonight's film is actually an award-winning film. It won the Audience Award at the 2010 Bare Bones International Film Festival. I really don't know if that's a good thing or not, because I've never heard of the Bare Bones International Film Festival, but just play along, please. This thing actually won a frickin' award. Let's see if it's any good. Tonight's film is a little horror comedy. Okay, good. I actually just looked it up. It is a horror comedy. Thank God. Called Dahmer versus Gacy. For those of you who really can't piece this film together off of that title, that means that Jeffrey Dahmer and John Wayne Gacy somehow, someway are going to fight each other. And if you are someone a lot like me and you're fascinated by serial killers, this is pretty cool. I mean, because when you think of lunatic serial killers, the big two that usually pop into anyone's head are John Wayne Gacy and Jeffrey Dahmer. Well, at least here we usually think of Dahmer, because Dahmer was doing most of his killing in Wisconsin. So usually we think of like Dahmer and Gein, but no one's ever heard of Ed fucking Gein, so why bother going into it? So, folks, tonight's film, yes, it is Dahmer vs. Gacy. It is a horror comedy from last year. That really is all that I know about it. I did happen to watch the trailer for it. The trailer looked almost hysterically corny. So, I'm having some rather high hopes for this thing. So, without further ado, folks, it's time to kick back, relax, and check out Dahmer vs. Gacy. So, wait a second. This secret military base has a soldier whose sole job is to patrol 3 feet of floor. That is funny as hell. I love it. So the US government is cloning the nastiest serial killers to ever walk the earth. But they've taken away any sort of conscience which these killers may have had. Somehow that seems almost like a really bad thing to do, man. And I believe that is Gacy showing up. The costume's rather accurate. Actually, this guy looks disturbingly a lot like, Gacy. That's almost frightening. Okay, that is probably one of the greatest scenes in film history involving a fucking mime. I never thought I'd have a positive thing to say about a goddamn mime. I never thought I'd have to say it in an episode of this series, so that is definitely a first. You know, guys, this actually I think is a good time to mention. You guys can hear this, right? This movie's got a fucking awesome soundtrack, man. I love it. Alright, I totally understand that this actually is just this is just sort of like nitpicking, but I just want to make this clear. They keep on mentioning Charles Manson as a serial killer. Charles Manson was not a serial killer. He was a multiple murderer. There is a difference. He actually would kill in, like, bunches, but he wouldn't go out and do, well, again, that honestly just splitting hairs, and it honestly is not going to affect whether or not the movie is any good. Just thought I'd toss it out there just because it was sort of bugging me a little. Wait a minute. Ninjas? They're gonna add ninjas to this shit? That is awesome! Okay, I would just like to say this right now. These have to be some of the most inept, useless, and retarded ninjas I have ever seen. And yet the scene is still really cool. Wow. We have Gacy and Dahmer arguing over which one is the better serial killer. This actually is a rather interesting fucking debate here. Well, that actually was an interesting way of, you know, ending the movie. What's really funny is that it ends on a sequel hook. That is definitely something to mention. So, I'm gonna shut off the movie now. So now it's time to actually discuss the film. See, guys, I really should give you guys a little bit of the history about my interest in wanting to see this film. Now, I stated earlier that I first heard about it in a circular from Family Video. When I first saw that, I thought, my God, this thing looks awful. And so, I immediately sought out more information on it. Shortly after that, I found the trailer on YouTube and I watched it. And all of a sudden, I went from this movie looks awful to I'm actually interested in checking this out. So then, I finally got to watch it today. And I'm going to tell you, this film is a hell of a lot better than I would ever have imagined. Now, before I happen to get into details, I do want to say right now, if you're a fan of slasher comedies, if you're a fan of dark comedies, I do highly recommend you go out and you look for this thing. I don't care where you look. I do not care if you look on Amazon or on iTunes or on Netflix. You have to watch this. Now, allow me to explain why. First off, the writing. The writing is really, really tight. The writing is really sharp and witty. I love it. This film is so perfectly paced. It never slows down once. Everything just keeps on moving. The acting is fantastic from everybody, and that is really shocking when you consider the fact that we're talking about a low-budget film. You normally don't picture that having good acting. It usually when we're talking about a low-budget film, the horrible acting is usually just one of the cherries on the cake that make it kind of funny. But here, guys, the acting is really, really tight, and it's just great. And the humor, now a whole lot of the humor is mostly dialogue-based, which is something that you don't normally picture with this. So basically, you have to be really, really into that kind of humor, and you're going to love it. Now, earlier I mentioned that the actor that they cast to play as Gacy looked a lot like John Wayne Gacy, but that honestly isn't saying much, because if I were to throw on a clown costume and slather my face in grease paint, I would look like Gacy. So that honestly isn't saying a whole lot. But when it comes to Jeffrey Dahmer, now we hit a small snag in this, and it's just the fact that the guy who they got to play Jeffrey Dahmer, who I believe the guy who played him was actually the film's director. Yes, it was. He doesn't look like Jeffrey Dahmer. In this film, he looks more like John Tesh than he does Jeffrey Dahmer. But his great acting makes up for it. Except I don't remember Dahmer having that weird fucking accent, which apparently everybody in, Wisconsin has. Because I've never heard anybody in this state actually have that accent, but that's always the one you hear whenever people from Wisconsin are fucking portrayed on television. It's really kind of weird, or television and movies. However, though, that honestly is not, now that is not enough to really ruin the film, because it actually kind of adds a little bit of, it sort of adds a little bit more charm to it. Effects are really solid, especially since most of it is blood work. A whole lot of it is effects involving blood. And really, the only times I can really gripe on that is there are a couple of early scenes where the blood looks a little bit more like cranberry sauce. It just looks kind of sort of like purplish and fucking lumpy, looks really weird. And then there's a later scene where a ninja is bleeding this like pinkish, orangish kind of blood, and Dahmer is, licking it up. It looks really fucking weird. But everything else looks really good, and I should mention, because people are probably going to ask, how in the hell do you make a film about two fucking serial killers who go out on a killing spree interesting? Well, first of all, you have to have good writing. That actually is step one. And step two, you have to have more than just the two killers going at it. You have to add a lot more, and this film does just that. We have a super serial killer who has a little bit of a corn fetish for reasons that are never fully explained. We have ninjas who are brought in, and there's almost no real logical explanation for it. And then we have a lunatic who's taking orders from God. God is talking to him through a fucking old, radio. And he basically is just there to be absolutely hysterical. So... you really have to add a lot to it, and this film is probably one of the best films I've seen ever. I mean, and that though, I should mention, is because I'm a fan of stuff from like Trauma and Full Moon, so I'm really into the low-budget, goofy horror comedy kind of thing. So naturally, this thing was really going to appeal to me, and I had no idea it was going to appeal that much. So folks, please, I am begging you, please, head out and try to find a copy of this. This is probably like one of the first times ever in the history of this series that I've done back-to-back episodes where I highly recommend the movies I have covered. That feels great. So yeah, guys, please, go out there, check it out. You have to watch this movie. Just trust me on that. You will thank me later. And with that, folks, we come to the close of another reaction and review. Until next time, ladies and gentlemen, take care, and I will see you all in the near future. Peace.